The opportunity like that goes crazy at those times.
Right, and it's the time, and recently it's true. I mean, you go into any bookstore, you look at all the books in a bookstore, and all the upbeat and positive books are all about me, myself, and I. You know, all the great things I'm going to do with my. All the downbeat books now in bookstores, and this has been this way for the last 25 years, are all about who we are collectively, the decline of the family, the decline of the nation, the decline of schools, the decline. So, but they become more moralistic during this period.
Yes, and why is that? They go from very crazy, almost individualistic and permissive, to moralistic and controlling.
Because they realize that those idealistic principles aren't really being realized. So the moralism starts, and then they become the moralistic elders of the crisis. We sometimes call them gray champions, right?
Yes.
FDR was that. Lincoln was that, right? Sam Adams was that. And then the Xer generation is the nomad archetype, right? Nomad, alone, right? Individual. All of life is just kind of a one-on-one encounter. I find I used to teach history to Gen Xers, and I found the only way to interest Gen Xers in history was to have them read biography. They all understood a life of an individual. That I can understand. Tell me about social trends and all that stuff. That makes no sense to me. I don't have anything in common with. But you tell me about an individual struggle, I get it, right? So they're the nomad archetype.
What are their qualities?
Their qualities are, and then their background, underprotected to sort of taking life as an individual, pragmatism, cynicism, get things done really well, break things down to their simplest components. I think efficacy in sort of execution is their strength. And by the way,
the generation before often will create breakthroughs, but the people who make those breakthroughs real is that nomad generation. They're the ones that perfect it and refine it. They take Microsoft and they, it's built, but these guys come in and they take it to the next level, Google, whatever.
Nomad are the generations. We're very lucky to have nomad, by the way. Our nation really hinges on them because they are the ones in midlife during the crisis. They determined whether we actually get through the damn thing alive. And while these old Aquarians, sometimes want to blow up the world, right?
Because they're moralistic,
they're
right?
Moralistic, yeah.
Let's just kill Putin,
yeah,
right? No matter what it means to the rest of the world. That means global war. The X generation's like more pragmatic about it, and this generation is the one in real leadership position in crisis.
They are the generals. They are the ones who are actually the hands-on leaders, right? And they were we were talking about them earlier. They were the Omar Bradleys, the General Prattons, the Dwight D. Eisenhowers, laconic prose, just everything to the point, right? Or, Harry Truman, who never had a comma in any of his sentences. Just, very simple utterances, right? So, always to the point, though, right? And then you have the next one is the hero generation, and we know their strengths. Community.
That's millennials.
Achievement. And it's the GI generation. And it's the Republican generation that created the United States of America, right? Yes. That fought the American Revolution and created the Constitution. Now, they are wonderful because they create these long-term institutions. They're institution defenders. They represent the community. They represent always optimism, the triumph of technology, but technology together, not like nomad technology. It's an individual cell phone. No, the GI generation, technology was always infrastructure that reformed our public spaces. We hardly have a concept of that anymore. And probably during the crisis, we'll have to actually rebuild that infrastructure.
Yes.
Right. And then finally, the artist archetype. These are the
should be the Z generation now.
Or the silent generation.
Silent generation, which in other words, these are people that during the war, during the crisis, they're protected. Their job is just shut up and deal with it because you're being supported by the elders that are fighting the war.
And they develop very early on an ear for sensitivity, for fairness. So very often the generation that's young develops a talent for the things that older generations aren't perceiving.
Yes.
And that's what's fascinating to me. And you see that today, by the way, among the group of kids I call Homelanders or Generation Z. You find that they're very caring. They're very much into kindness in a world today which is all into cancel culture and screaming everyone down, and the world is being divided into these black and white groups, or I should say red and blues groups. And a world, half of Americans today believe a civil war is very likely. This wasn't even on the radar screen 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Half of America is saying that. And we see, too, the possibilities of global war now rising. So we're at this place now. This younger generation senses that. And that's why they're into nuance, kindness, seeing the kinds of distinctions which are lost on older generations. The silent generation is the same way, by the way. So these are the different archetypes. And a couple
they keep rotating.
And they keep rotating. And a couple of them are big. I mean, you look at Joseph Campbell, who wrote about myth. And, Lucas with Star Wars, and we know it was done on Joseph Campbell. But you see in myth, every phase of life is occupied in the same order as we're talking about historically. You always find that the young hero, like Arthur, always has a much older wizard, like Merlin, who helps him, right? So there's always the prophet archetype in old age when the hero is coming of age, right? And then when it's reversed, when it's the other way, when you have an elder hero and a young prophet, that's the storyline of the founding of religions, right? That's more like Orpheus or Jesus or Buddha, or you're right, it's like Pontius Pilate or Hammurabi, who's sort of this, very secure but spiritually soul dead world. And a young awakener, a young prophet challenging that, speaking truth to power. Now, they're both heroes, but in almost opposite directions.
Yes.
One is reshaping the inner world. The other is reshaping the outer world. The hero reshapes the outer world, the realm of kingdoms, the realm of society, making new collective infrastructure. The prophet is reshaping the inner world of culture. By the way, in America today, when we talk about politics, we always say post-war, right? We say, oh, yeah, that's the way political institutions have been post-war. We mean World War II. We talk about culture, we talk about since the 60s.
That's right.
And that's how we periodize things, depending on whether you're talking about inner world or outer world.
Tell us, where do you see us now? 2008, you see as the beginning of the winter, the crisis period. It's